Welcome! The virtual event will begin shortly. Let's get to know the virtual event environment. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a row of icons, each with a unique function. Icons vary from event to event, so you may see some or all of the icons covered in this video. This is the Restore icon. It will restore all of the windows to their original positions. The video and slides icons allow you to minimize each window and customize your screen. Click on the group chat icon to connect with other attendees. The Q&A icon is where you can ask questions to the speaker or ask for technical help. Just type your question into the box and submit. You'll see a brief confirmation message when you do. Click on the summary icon to read the event summary and on the speaker icon to learn more about the event speakers. When you click on the resources icon, you'll find additional information pertaining to the event. And last but not least, if real-time closed captioning is available, use this icon to follow along throughout the event. If you have technical difficulties, here are a few tips that can solve some of the most common issues. If you don't see the video or hear the audio, try refreshing your browser. If you can't hear the presenter, verify that your speakers are turned on and the volume is turned up. The platform works best when watching on a computer or laptop, not on a smartphone or tablet. If you have a weak internet connection, try connecting directly to your router with an Ethernet cable. And don't worry if you miss something, because you can view a recording of the event later. All attendees will receive a thank you email following the event with the information you need to view the recording on demand. Enjoy the event!
Hello and welcome to the Nutrition and Diabetes Workshop. And welcome back to those who have participated in our previous diabetes workshops. I'm Karen Cafanteris, Associate State Director for AARP here in Michigan. I want to thank Peak Performance Physical Therapy, our partner in all of our 2021 health and wellness workshops. Peak Performance Physical Therapy has 4 locations in the greater Lansing area, with clinics in Lansing, DeWitt, Okemos, and Holt. Now, you just saw a short video about how to use the icons to manipulate your screen. I want to just do a quick reminder, the chat icon, which looks like the thought bubble in the comic, is for commenting, placing comments and interacting with other participants. But if you want to ask a question, you want to use the Q&A icon, which will pop up to a box, and you want to put your question in there. You can ask questions at any time. And if you'd like to listen to the presentation in Spanish, you need to click the connect button for the Spanish language in the Interpretify box. Then once the presentation starts, which is not quite yet, you mute the sound coming from the video box in the lower left-hand corner. Like I said, you can ask questions at any time, and those using the simultaneous Spanish translation, we do have a translator working behind the scenes to translate any questions that are posted in Spanish so that our presenters can then answer them. So please feel free to post questions in Spanish. This is the second of 5 sessions on prediabetes and diabetes. And if you're not signed up for the remaining 2, you can do so by going to the AARP Michigan website at www.aarp.org/mi and then clicking on the AARP Michigan events, virtual events found towards the top of the page. There on the virtual events page, you will find all of our upcoming events, including the last 2 diabetes workshops, which are on behavior modification and on exercise. On the site, you'll also find recent past events that you can watch on demand. All right, enough of that. It's my pleasure to introduce our presenters today. We have Austin Joseph. Austin holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Dietetics and Human Nutrition from Colorado State University and is a nutritionist for Whole Health Club. Whole Health Club, located in Colorado, uses evidence-based nutrition practices and lifestyle interventions to help clients adopt a sustainable, whole foods, plant-based lifestyle. As Whole Health Club's in-house nutritionist, Austin has prepared meal plans and provided nutritional counseling to help thousands of people take back control of their health. Austin is also the co-author of a bookshop.com bestseller, The Whole Health Cookbook. When not at Whole Health Club, Austin can be found running long miles along Colorado's beautiful trails. Sam Grantham, our next presenter, is the co-founder and CEO of Whole Health Club, the only gym with an on-site teaching kitchen. Sam enjoys meeting clients where they're at and using his own meat and potatoes Midwestern background to help clients transform their unhealthy eating habits into nutrient-dense, plant-powered meals. Sam has been featured alongside nationally recognized speakers in nutrition panels at the Plant-Based Summit and has hosted educational seminars on workplace wellness for the South Metro Denver Chamber of Commerce. In his free time, Sam enjoys recreational sports of any kind and being a full-time bulldog dad. Connor McClintock is a passionate civil servant and leader, a Navy combat veteran, father of 2 wild boys, and husband to an amazing wife and mother. He grew up in Chicago and Northwest Indiana, so another Midwestern boy, and eventually landed in Colorado, where he likes to run with regular mediocrity. His pastimes include family, friends, fitness, and trying to make the world a better place, one plant-based convert at a time. So welcome to all of you, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karen.
Thanks.
All right, so I'm going to let you guys go ahead and start. We have a very busy information-packed session. I do want to remind people you can ask questions at any time. We will be answering those questions at the end of the presentation, though. So, Austin, take it away.
All right, thank you, Karen. I'm going to start off by actually turning it over to Sam, so that Sam can talk with Connor, and we can let you all know what Connor's story is, and how cool it is with his experience with type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, so thanks for everybody joining today. So Connor's an absolutely awesome story. Immediately when Connor came into the gym, we connected on our Midwest roots and the crazy idea that we were going to change how we grew up eating to, convert and become healthier. So Connor has a really cool story. So as you guys can see over here on the right, what I like to say is we have old Connor along with his wife, and what we're going to see is new Connor. But I want to go through some of old Connor's stats. So this is Connor when he came to Whole Health Club, to get better, to do a 6-week challenge. He'll talk about that. So Connor, in this picture here in the vest, how old were we here in this picture?
I think I was probably 35, 36 years old in that picture.
So about 35, 36. Do we got what are the weight stats we had about 35, 36 years old?
It's not good. I was pushing probably almost 230 in that picture, and I'm a whopping 5'5", so not great.
So yeah, obviously 5'5". We want to, we would want to make sure that weight's a little more. How many kids did you have at the time of this picture?
That picture, I think my wife was pregnant with our first, so 0 kids at that time.
So no kids. So maybe not quite as stressful as it might be with 2 little crazy awesome kids around. What was your full-time job during that picture as well?
I was full-time on a incident management assistance team, which is basically a rapid response for FEMA. So deploying across the country to disasters all across the country.
So definitely still a stressful job, and we could see maybe why some of the lifestyle habits got a little wonky. And how many medications roughly were we on or about to go on in that picture?
At that time, I took metformin. I was on statins or getting put on statins, and I took omeprazole every single day.
So for anybody on this call, metformin is a diabetic drug. It's to help manage diabetes in the early stages. That's before generally we would get insulin involved in the situation. And then the statins are going to be a cholesterol drug, meaning Connor's cholesterol was too high. And then omeprazole is a heartburn medication or acid reflux medication, which Connor I had to take every day. So those are some interesting stats, but I definitely want to look at new Connor. So there's new Connor, guys. I don't know if you could tell, it looks like a completely different person. Probably still weighs less carrying a human on his back in that picture. So, Connor, in new, updated, healthy Connor, what is your age in this picture? It looks younger.
Yeah, I'm probably almost 40 years old in that picture.
So we're about 40. So we get about
I'm
5 years
40
in.
now, and that I was probably 30. Yep.
So again, about 5 years, and we look in this good a shape. How much weight do you have on your body in this picture, Connor?
Besides the kid on my back, without him, I'm about 167,
I mean,
170, right around there.
so just 60 to 70 pound weight loss over the period of time between previous Connor and this Connor while getting older, which is something I think is incredible. And it looks like we got a couple kids in this picture as opposed to the pre-kid we had in the other picture.
Yep, 2 kids now.
So if anybody on this call has kids, generally your life gets a little bit more hectic, a little bit more stressful. And so those can be a lot of things that would generally cause people to gain weight or throw them out of whack. While Connor was having these kids, well, his wife was having these kids. Let's be clear, she was doing the hard work. While Connor was helping raising those kids, they were able to make a lot of lifestyle changes. And Connor, in your full-time job, what was your full-time job in this picture?
Still with FEMA, but a couple years later, higher position, and so not deploying as much, but still in a very high stress and much higher, more responsibility position.
Yeah, absolutely. And Connor, the number of medications you're on in this picture.
Goose egg, 0.
And so one of the reasons I love this picture is one, they just like a super happy family, but I really love the idea of like aging doesn't mean we have to get less healthy in every aspect. In fact, our lifestyle can make us feel younger at an older age than we did when we had bad lifestyle habits younger. So what I want to do is I want to kind of go into Connor's story and journey about how he got to Whole Health Club and how he discovered us. Now that you guys have kind of got some of his stats and you can see that Connor can add kids, Connor can add a promoted job, he can live a more stressful life and still be much, much healthier by choosing proper lifestyle habits. And that's something that, means a lot to us. So we're going to go to the next slide here. Connor, when did you first realize you were becoming sick?
So that was probably right about the time. So that first picture, old Connor picture that you showed, was right about the time that I came back with the type 2 diabetes diagnosis. Like I said, I was on, at that time, that's when they put me on metformin. They put me on statin because cholesterol was high, and they said, oh, it runs in your family, and diabetes runs in your family. Like, this is just what you need to do. So that was probably right about that time. So about 5 years, 4 or 5 years ago.
And then,
I knew I was coming in. Let's just say this. I knew I was, before I walked in to that doctor's office, I knew I was in trouble ahead of time.
And being a Chicago kid, how did you eat? What was your typical day of eating as a Midwest Chicago guy?
Well, as you can imagine, just, every meat being the staple, most people who know, like, I mean, it was not good meat either. I love my Italian beefs and Chicago dogs and all that good stuff, sausage pizza and that kind of stuff. So typical Southside Chicago diet.
Norm, doing anything you were
Sam, we
living.
don't hear you. Oh,
You got me now, Connor?
gotcha.
Yeah. So it's like, to me, it's you weren't living, out of the norm of anybody that would be in the South Side of Chicago. Your habits were typical. You would go out to eat like they would. You weren't overeating in a sense. You weren't doing anything. You were living the typical life. So let's go to here, Connor. So when you went to the doctor, obviously they told you it runs in your family. What advice did they give you to eliminate these medications or, get healthier?
So that was when I really had to make some hard choices, because when I first my first doctor, who came back when I came back with that diagnosis, they said I had 2 choices. I could go on this like pudding type diet, where I just ate this, like I said, almost like pudding type stuff, or I can try this new thing called keto, the ketogenic diet, and where I ate very high fats, lower protein, and almost no carbs. And yeah, so that was I went with the keto stuff, and that was new to me at the time. It was actually before the craze of keto, right, as it is right now. Um, but basically, it came back and realized immediately that one, it wasn't going to be sustainable, and two, um, I was like, okay, great. I'll lose some weight on this diet, but I'm going to die of a heart attack because I'm eating like high fats, and it's certainly not helping with the statin problem and the cholesterol problem.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. It's symptom chasing and trying to solve one of the issues rather than the whole can sometimes lead us down a path that feels like we're doing correct, lifestyle changes, but it can often be a little bit different. So let's go into when this change happened. When did you find Whole Health Club, Connor?
So I found Whole Health Club about 2 years ago, and I have to give credit to my wife on this. She found Sam. Well, Sam found her, I should say. Um, through. But they're a little Whole Health Club's little gym. It's about 5 minutes down where we live in Littleton, Colorado. And at that time, if you can tell the timeline that we're kind of spelling out here, I'd been on this journey, this health journey. I had lost some of that nearly 60 pounds from where I am today. I'd lost some of it, but not much. I've kind of ballooned back and went back and forth. My wife found Whole Health Club, and we went in. That's when I met Sam, and they brought us in for that 6 week challenge. And I'll tell the story as you keep going down the slides. But it was a day that I immediately was like, okay, we'll see how this goes. Let me just put it that way.
So more of the story, listen to your wife.
Yes, always.
So Connor, tell us kind of your initial thoughts when I dropped the plant-based bomb on you and said, hey man, we're going to do a plant-based diet.
Well, that's what I was saving. So we walk in, and Sam, says, "Hey, here's the 6 week challenge, and you're gonna work out." Which I'm Navy veteran. I'm no slouch when it comes to working out, but obviously 230 pounds. It had been a long time. I needed to get back into shape. So of course, I'm like, I can do that. But then they gave me the Sam gave me the meal plan, 6 week whole food plant based meal plan. And I said, wait, what is this? This is a vegan? They're like, no, it's a plant based diet, but you can do this. And I looked at my wife and I said, you know what, I can do anything for 6 weeks and I'll finish with a steak, because
And
this is stupid.
and then we'll go from there.
And
What happened?
yeah, well, I'll tell you, it's not even after 6 weeks. Well, in 6 weeks, I lost almost 30 pounds. I lost 25 pounds, I think, was my total. But I could tell you after 2.5 weeks, 2.5, 3 weeks in, a number of things happened. One, I woke up. I had so much more energy. I was feeling like, obviously, the weight was dropping. I had so much more energy that it dawned on me that one, I didn't know you could feel this good, and two, I had been feeling like crap the previous 38 years of my life. Those were the two big realizations. Another third one that isn't part of the diabetes thing, but for the previous 10 years, I'd been taking omeprazole every single day of my life for severe heartburn. And by 10 o'clock in the morning, if I didn't take my pill that morning, I would know because I would be in severe pain. Well, 10 days into the whole food plant-based diet, I just looked at my wife and I realized I hadn't taken omeprazole in a week and I didn't even know. So that was 3 weeks into it. By the end of the 6 weeks, like I said, I was 25 pounds down, and I was sold. I was like, there's absolutely no way I'm ever going back.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, right? Because a lot of things when we talk about changing our lifestyle, they're extremely measurable, which Connor obviously had. He lost weight, things got better, he got in better shape. But to me, one of the most important things in approaching a lifestyle change this way is the enjoyment Connor had in his own life while making changes. Often when we're on severe calorically restricted diets or we're doing these extreme things, the entire process, we don't feel better. We, however, are doing it to see these numerical numbers fall into place. And so that's something we really love about teaching this lifestyle is you can feel fundamentally better, while you're making these changes. And I think that's, when Connor got to the end, that kind of realized, why would I go back? I mean, I this is how you're supposed to feel, but I hadn't felt this way probably since you were a kid when, kids are invincible and they can feel great all the time. But outside of that, as an adult, we didn't realize how we had to feel. And so I think that's an incredible, testament to Connor's, mental belief and recognizing the way he felt during this process. So now, guys, we want to talk about a little bit, after hearing Connor's journey and what a lot of things can do, we want to talk about how some of the changes Connor made actually affected his body and helped him be able to get off metformin and return to some of his normal blood numbers that we were looking for.
Right. So, we want to talk about how Connor was able to make this change, how he was able to reverse his type 2 diabetes and go in remission for his type 2 diabetes, and how that journey is applicable to other people. But we can't start talking about type 2 diabetes without talking about insulin resistance. So first, we want to talk a little bit about insulin resistance and insulin sensitivity. So I have a question for all of you before we jump into that. So I would like you to tell me, using the poll function here, what is insulin? Is it a type of food? Is it a hormone? Or is it a medication? And I'll give you all about 60 seconds to answer this question for us. But we would like to know what you think insulin is right now. And this is just what you think it is.
And insulin's an interesting one, right? We hear about it a lot. It's often talked about, but I feel like as deep of an understanding as we should have for, what insulin is, what it does, what its function is, where its value lies, I think that's an important thing that the public should become a little bit more aware of. And I think it would give us a deeper understanding of how our body's attempting to function, how this would work. So I really do, think some of these things, when we hear medications talked about, when we hear hormones talked about, when we hear foods talked about, see, I'm not going to give you guys any hints there. What we need to do is we need to make sure that we are doing our due diligence and we are doing our research on, what these are and how they're affected, rather than sometimes being beholden to a buzzword. And I think those can often dictate the inappropriate things. Because I know for me, I for a long time didn't have a true understanding of insulin, its function, or, what it actually does and what it actually is, to be honest. So it looks like we're getting a lot of responses here. As we'll wrap these up pretty soon, because we're getting quite a bit of you to answer here. Beautiful. There we go.
All right. So there's our results. So most of you called insulin a hormone, which is perfect. That is correct. Insulin is a hormone. For those of you who said it is a medication, you are not completely wrong, because insulin is a medication that we use to treat type 1 and type 2 diabetes. However, what the medication is doing is just replacing that hormone, because for whatever reason, whether our bodies aren't responding to it correctly or our bodies are not making it correctly, depending on what type of diabetes we have and the severity of diabetes, is we're just replacing that hormone with the medication insulin. So insulin is a hormone. Next up, I want to know what you all think insulin does. What is insulin's job in the body? Does it tell the muscles and liver to decrease the blood sugar, to pull sugar out of the bloodstream? Does it tell the muscles and liver to increase the blood sugar, to start pumping sugar into the bloodstream? Or does it tell the stomach that, hey, we're getting hungry, it's been a while since the last meal, it's time for us to eat? So go ahead and vote again using the poll function. I would like to know what you think.
And again, I think for the longest time, when I grew up, I honestly only knew insulin as a medication. That's when I would hear about it, when, I had a relative or somebody I knew or someone in school that had, diabetes. That was when I heard about insulin, how it was produced, how it functioned. That wasn't something that I think was, ever taught to me. Now, Austin, you probably got taught a lot of this, getting your college degree. So that, if you guys do want to learn about it, get yourself a dietetics degree, and I'm sure they'll explain it. However, I do think it would have been a great thing with how prevalent, diabetes is, and how much that insulin matters in the course of diabetes. It would be something that would be, I think more well-versed to be taught from a younger age, or taught as a basic part of, nutrition growing up and, in families' everyday lives, because those are important things. So it looks like we're getting pretty good here on the polls. There it is.
All right. So 77% of you said that insulin's job is to tell the muscles and liver to decrease blood sugar. That is correct. What insulin does for us is that hormone lets a lot more than just our muscles and muscles and liver. It lets all of the insulin sensitive tissues know. But muscles and liver are the two primary insulin sensitive tissues. So those are the two tissues in our body that respond to insulin the most. And it tells them, hey, the blood sugar is getting too high. We just ate a meal. It's time to start pulling that sugar out of the blood, or pulling that glucose out of the blood. You may hear me use glucose and blood sugar interchangeably today. They reference the same thing. But it's time to start pulling that glucose out of our blood and storing it away for later, for when we're between meals, for when we're exercising, and we need that energy again later.
Yes. So let's go into what is insulin, what is its job. So what I wanted to show you guys was something that I always found very helpful as a small analogy to truly understand insulin's function. So as we're going to go through here, that's going to be our bloodstream, right? Now, in our bloodstream, when we consume food, our body's job is to break that food down into usable stuff. We have proteins, we have all these things. One of the main use cases is getting down to glucose, because our body needs glucose to function. So these S's, sugar, are representing glucose. So we ate some food, now it's in our bloodstream. It's not really useful there. So what we need to do is we need to figure out how to get this to the rest of our body, but it's blocked off. It won't, it needs a key. It needs something to open the door. So there goes our pancreas producing some insulin for us. So now with this insulin production, and we have insulin in our bloodstream, the normal reaction is it opens up the pathway to go to the rest of our body. And then out goes that glucose to, let's say, our brain, our muscles, wherever we may need it. It's going to fill up our muscles so we can go work out. It's going to have it's going to go to our brain so we can think and function throughout the day. And so that's the way insulin is supposed to function. Think of it like a key. You got a bunch of blood sugar. It needs to be used by the rest of your body. Insulin comes in, opens the door, and says, there you go. So that's a great, super simple way to understand that insulin acts as a key. So how can this key be affected? Oops. Oh, yeah, here we go. Perfect. Nope, we were right. Go right to the next one. So what I wanted to do is ask a poll to you guys on this next one here is, what causes insulin resistance? Is it eating too much sugar? Is it being overweight, eating too much fat, or a sedentary lifestyle? And I think this is important because what insulin resistance is going to tell us, everybody, is a lot of times why our body is not functioning the right way. Why do we need support from medication? And a lot of times that's through insulin resistance. And so I think we need to make sure we have a good, deep understanding of why insulin resistance is important here. So it looks like we got a wide variety of answers here. I like this one so far. So we're going to give you guys about 30 more seconds, to get some of these answers in here. Because I still see some trickling in. There we go. We got some more. All right. Oh, there we go. Beautiful. So we have a wide variety of answers here. And this is kind of a loaded question, right? Because being overweight, a sedentary lifestyle, both can cause this. What I would say is the thing we need to focus on is eating too much fat, right? While sugar has its problems, and we can go into that, often we misconstrued slightly what is more important in eliminating, diabetes. So what we need is, we need our body to manage our sugar, but we need to figure out why our body is having trouble managing that sugar. So I would be willing to say in Austin that being overweight, eating too much fat, and a sedentary lifestyle typically are going to hold a much larger candle in why our body cannot manage our sugar properly. So I'm going to take you into another visual here really quick. What causes insulin resistance? Go again, looks familiar. same stuff, right? There's our bloodstream. We ate some food. We got some sugar in there, and we're going to the rest of the body. Here's something I want you guys to notice, though. Notice those little yellow lines right around the rest of the body. And so excess fat or something like a gum in a lock can make this key less effective or require us better or more key options, aka we need more insulin to make the same function happen. And that's how we become insulin resistant, is because our fat is not allowing our body to leave the blood sugar. So what this may look like is additional strain on the rest of your body. So as we know, our pancreas produces insulin, but we needed to produce twice as much. Our pancreas had to work twice as hard to produce this amount of insulin to make this function, right? And so luckily, our own body can still produce enough to do it here, but that would be where you would see a bunch of other issues down the line of why we need things like metformin or why we need insulin to allow our body to rid that blood sugar. So as we're going forward here, I'm going to have Austin take it away on explaining exactly what causes and what is insulin resistance.
Yeah, so like Sam, said so well, I really like that lock and key analogy, because insulin resistance is the prevention of insulin from contacting those tissues the way it needs to. The tissues are not responding to insulin appropriately, so they're not pulling that glucose, they're not pulling the sugar out of the bloodstream the way they should be. And a lot of the reason that happens is due to those fatty deposits in the muscles and in the liver, which we build up as we eat a high-fat diet, or if we're overweight, or if we are lacking in exercise. Usually it takes a combination of those three to really build up significant enough fatty deposits for us to start running into trouble with insulin resistance. Mm-hmm. And to help ourselves here, we can change our eating habits. We can lose some weight. We can start an exercise routine. And by doing that, we're taking away those factors that led to insulin resistance, and we're improving our insulin sensitivity. So if we're more insulin sensitive, we are less insulin resistant. And by improving our insulin sensitivity, we lower our risk for diabetes, and we lower the severity of the type 2 diabetes if we already have it.
I love that.
So why do we care about this? Why is this important for diabetes? Well, there are a couple of reasons why this is really important when we're talking about diabetes. The first one is that this is kind of the root cause of a lot of the negative effects of diabetes. So one of the common complications of diabetes is very high blood pressure. And very high blood pressure long-term can lead to a variety of really, really terrible effects. That's where blindness from diabetes comes. It can cause a condition called a diabetic retinopathy, where that high blood pressure damages the retinas in the back of your eyes, causing blindness. It can lead to chronic kidney disease because that high blood pressure damages the kidneys. And it can lead to heart disease, of course, as we know, high blood pressure sometimes does. And the reason for that high blood pressure is that when there's all that sugar concentrated in our bloodstream, our body can't just sit with our blood being just sugar. We have to be able to move the blood still. It has to be able to flow. So we're going to pump more and more water into the bloodstream so that we can still keep our blood liquid. And that raises the blood pressure dramatically and can lead to those negative effects. So when we have rampant, uncontrolled type 2 diabetes and our blood is just full of those sugars and we're not getting rid of those sugars appropriately, that's how we end up with a lot of those really negative side effects of diabetes. So it's important to know that so that we can, know that that's the reason that high blood sugar is dangerous for us, especially in the long term. And it's the reason why we want to be responding to insulin well. Because if we're responding to insulin well, then our bodies will naturally control that blood sugar. They'll pull it back down. This is also the reason why in the later stages of type 2 diabetes, doctors will put patients on insulin, is because we need that insulin to bring blood sugar down. We need it to control that blood sugar, or else we potentially get ourselves into a dangerous situation.
And Austin, I think this is going to be a great segue into this slide because you mentioned something about heart disease. And I feel like it's very important for everybody on this call. And if we address it later, that's okay, because this is important to me. The number one reason, or the number one way people with type 2 diabetes end up passing away, or the reason they'll die, is generally actually from heart disease, right? And I think this segues in when Austin was speaking on blood pressure, cholesterol, we're talking about fatty deposits. This is important, right? Because a lot of times according to this slide, and as we saw a lot of people saying eating too much sugar. Well, like, look, nobody on here is advocating to eat a bunch of table sugar constantly. But what we do want to know is diabetes isn't a sugar disease. It is a sugar management disease. And my favorite analogy as a business owner, right, is if I'm a bad manager and I fire all of my employees, I didn't become a better manager. I am just no longer managing any of the things I was bad at. And so when people eliminate eating any carbohydrates, even the good ones, or any glucose or any sugar from their diet, their body got no better at managing these. And the unfortunate part is some of the things that cause our higher risk of heart disease are often ones void of carbohydrates, which is why people that are diabetic tend to eat a much higher rate of those foods, and that's where those mortalities come from. So think better management, not elimination. And this comes from what Austin was speaking on with insulin sensitivity and many of those things. And that's important to us. So now, after we talked about this, I'm going to pass it back to Austin to give you guys some polls on what we think would be a better lifestyle choices.
Absolutely, yeah. So let's jump into those polls here. So we want to know, with these polls, we're going to give you 2 food options, and we want to know what you think the better option for preventing or reversing type 2 diabetes is. And remember, our goal here is not just eliminating blood sugars, like Sam talked about. We're not just trying to eliminate carbohydrates from the diet. We want to get our bodies better at managing these blood sugars. So we want to think what's going to increase our insulin sensitivity. So with that in mind, I want to hear from you all. What do we think is a better choice for improving insulin sensitivity, chicken or sweet potatoes? We'll give you all a little bit of time to answer this question here. Do we think chicken with its low carb content or sweet potatoes with their higher carb content but much lower fat content than chicken are going to be the better option for us?
And
all right, getting some answers coming in here.
We're going to let you guys know neither of these items were deep fried for the sake of this poll. This is baked chicken and a baked sweet potato.
Yes, that's an important thing to note, is that these are not fries and fried chicken. Exactly. All right, we got some good answers in here. So it looks like we had a pretty good split. Most people answered sweet potatoes. And yeah, that's our answer too. We would rather have you eating sweet potatoes than chicken. And the reason for that is that chicken is going to be much higher in fat than sweet potatoes. It's also going to be more calorie dense. And it's higher specifically in saturated fats and animal protein, which we know are correlated with a higher risk of type 2 diabetes, where sweet potatoes are full of fiber, are full of micronutrients like beta carotene and anthocyanins, which we know are correlated with a reduced risk of type 2 diabetes. So we're going to ask you another food question like that. We want to know, what's the better choice for improving insulin sensitivity? Should we eat berries or cheese?
So we have a fruit, right, with some sugars in it. We got cheese with an exceptional small amount of carbohydrates, if any, but higher fat. All right. It looks like we know where this one's going.
There we go. All right. There we go. So we piled on the berries. That's our answer too. Berries, again, are high in those anthocyanins that sweet potatoes are going to contain. That's a phytochemical, so that's just a nutrient that's not a vitamin or mineral, but is still beneficial. And those anthocyanins can actually help us regulate our blood sugar and help lower our blood pressure. They're also going to be high in fiber. And then what's important here is what berries don't have that cheese does have. So what berries don't have that cheese does have is high amounts of saturated fat, high amounts of animal protein again. So those things that we know are associated with an increased risk of insulin resistance.
There is also, as Austin will cover later. So we're going to go into one more. I'll let Austin fire this question off. There we go. There's one more thing that I love. There's amazing studies that show that berries specifically actually reduce your glycemic load when eating other high sugar content foods. And Austin will get into that later, but that's a really, really cool thing to know, is that while berries have sugar, they're actually going to help your body regulate the uptake of that sugar. And so it's going to bring a smaller glycemic load when you eat them. Really, really cool stuff in that study. But we can go to the next one because I just love that study.
All right, so last of these food questions for you. What's a better choice for improving insulin sensitivity? Should we eat beef? And this is lean, organic, grass-fed ground beef. Or should we eat beans? And for the sake of this exercise, when I talk about beans, I mean plain beans. I don't mean like the sugary, baked beans that have all the good brown sugar and syrup in them.
We're not doing the Midwest style beans. We're doing the good old healthy style beans here. But again, organic grass-fed beef as well.
Looks like we have a pretty decisive answer here. So yeah, that's our answer too. We would rather have you eating beans or lentils or peas, anything from the legumes family, than that organic grass-fed beef. A couple reasons for that. We can actually see on this label. So even lean beef still has a high fat content. 85% lean sounds pretty good until you realize that means 15% of that chunk of meat that we're eating is fat. That's quite a bit of fat. Again, those high amounts of saturated fats are going to increase insulin resistance, versus in beans, which are high in fiber, high in those good complex carbohydrates, are going to help us lower insulin resistance.
And I think we've explained this one, a decent amount of times, but we really wanted to drive this home, guys, is that fat, a lot of times, particularly, saturated fats, and again, a lot of animal-based foods are just going to come with high fat contents. And again, as Austin keeps referencing, those animal proteins, lowering those things are actually going to be what is going to help improve your insulin sensitivity. So by eating a high amounts of fat, it just makes it makes your body a bad manager of sugar. Right. And that's a super simple way to think about it. The higher fat content we eat, the more likely our body is going to mismanage or mishandle the way it should handle sugar. And often, again, just eliminating eating sugar all entirely does not make you not a diabetic or not have diabetic symptoms. The ability to manage the sugar properly is what's going to show you whether you're a diabetic or not. And so I think that's very important. It also happens to coincide with eliminating the highest causes of morbidity if you are a diabetic. And quite frankly, the highest causes of death in the United States would be eliminated by lowering these foods in general as well. So I think it's like, when you look at the whole, that's what we want to capture. We're not just here to solve just the diabetes. That'll happen, but we want the other parts of your body to function better and be healthier as well, and lower our risk, of mortality in all sections of our life. So I'm going to pass this next slide so Austin can really dive in and explain this. And we're going to give a little sugar disclaimer here.
Yeah, and really quick, that sugar disclaimer is when we talk about keeping carbs in our diet, not eliminating carbs, we are talking about more complex carbohydrates. So things like oatmeal, like brown rice, like beans. Those are those more complex carbohydrates that are digested more slowly, and our bodies can handle them a lot better, especially if we already have type 2 diabetes. We are never telling you to go eat a bunch of Snickers bars. You will not hear that from us. Those kinds of simple sugars that we find in dessert foods, in ice cream, in table sugar, those things we do want to avoid. And the same kind of thing with fats. We're not telling you that all fats are bad, but we want to reduce fats, and we want to think about the sources of fat. So we don't necessarily want to be eating a double bacon cheeseburger with all kinds of saturated animal fat in it. But a handful of pistachios, that's going to be a lot better for us. Those fats are generally unsaturated. And I want us to think with both sugar and fats about where can we find these in nature. In nature, we're really only going to find sugar in fruit. And it just so happens that most fruits our body responds pretty well to, and they don't spike our blood sugar out of control. In nature, we're going to find most fats in pretty limited places. Nuts, if you've ever sat there and shelled your own nuts, especially if you're not using a nutcracker, they're pretty difficult to get into. We're not going to be able to sit there and eat a whole lot of nuts the way they actually come in nature if they're not pre-shelled for us. So just kind of thinking about the way that those things come in nature, and where would we naturally have access to these things when we're not buying them at the grocery store and they're just ready made for us. So to go back to what causes insulin resistance. So you may have heard me earlier mention that the muscles and liver are insulin sensitive tissues. So those are the two largest tissues in our body that are responsible for pulling glucose, for pulling blood sugar out of the bloodstream. But fatty deposits in them, which you can see with this little yellow line here, that's blocking that little blue bar, it's blocking the key. They prevent those tissues from recognizing and responding to insulin. And that's a problem for us because, as we know, that causes our blood sugar to stack up. That causes us to produce more and more insulin in order to get the same result of just clearing that sugar out of the bloodstream. And if we are producing too much insulin over time, then that can actually cause our pancreas to burn out. And then our bodies become incapable of producing insulin because they've been working overtime so much to try and clear those sugars out.
And Austin,
so that's
one thing with the overtime that I want to make sure, because I love this. Austin taught me this one, guys. This one's awesome. So I'm going to probably oversimplify it and explain it. But what happens when your pancreas goes into overdrive is it believes it's going to send your body, after it spikes up, this dramatic dip of all of these sugars being released. It's going to put your body in what's called a starvation mode. Think of it like you have a line and you're pumping this out, and then all of a sudden you pumped out enough insulin and now it's going to go down, down, down. And when it goes below this line, your liver, being very smart, is like, I got your back. I'm going to produce a bunch of fat to save us. So it almost is a self-fulfilling prophecy of when you're insulin resistant, your body is actually going to produce more fat to make it even more difficult for you to do those things. And so I think that's just a super cool, unique thing, is pumping out insulin doesn't, run out our pancreas. It doesn't just do that. It puts us into starvation mode and we produce more fat because our liver is trying to help us out and save us in nature. But sorry to interrupt there, Austin. I just love when you taught me that one.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah. And the good thing about that kind of cycle that Sam talked about is that cycle also works in the other direction. So as we improve our insulin sensitivity, as we get our bodies better at pulling glucose out of the bloodstream again, then it gets easier and easier to improve our insulin sensitivity again. So even though it can spiral downwards, we can also spiral upwards, and small improvements will help us dramatically down the road. So how can we use this to reverse our type 2 diabetes like Connor did? Well, before we go into that, I want to talk about some numbers and give us some background on what numbers lead to a diabetes diagnosis. So our normal range, so what we would consider normal, healthy, not at risk of diabetes, is we're going to do something called a post-oral blood glucose test. Some of you may have done this before. If you've been to your doctor and they've given you this test, you drink what's called a glucose load, basically a little cup of sugar water. So you drink that, and then you wait 2 hours, and then they will check what your blood sugar is 2 hours later. Now, what we expect is by the time 2 hours have passed, you haven't cleared all of those sugars out, but your body has started to respond. It has started to produce insulin and react to that insulin, and our muscles and liver are now pulling the sugar out of the bloodstream. So the normal range is less than 140 milligrams per deciliter, and that's just the concentration. So it's how much glucose for how much blood. So less than 140 milligrams per deciliter is considered normal. Another way that we have to measure this is A1C, which is an inflammatory marker. And we can also use that to measure and diagnose diabetes. So we want that below 5.7%. That's considered the normal range. Now, if we get above that, we're considered to have prediabetes. And what prediabetes is, hey, you're not technically diabetic yet, but you're headed in that direction. We need to start making some changes and being more careful, or else we're going to get up into that diabetic range. So prediabetes is 140 to 199 milligrams per deciliter concentration in the blood, or A1C of 5.7 to 6.4%. And then diabetes is 200 milligrams per deciliter or higher, and then A1C 6.5% or higher. That's when we're like, hey, we're in trouble. Our bodies are not responding well to insulin, and we need to start looking at some medical interventions and taking metformin or prescribing insulin. Now, I want us to remember that these are a spectrum. You're not really that much sicker at 200 milligrams per deciliter than you are at 199. So if you're at 199, that doesn't mean that you can just keep doing whatever you want. It's just that there had to be a cutoff somewhere. So that's where we made that cutoff. So now that we've kind of discussed those numbers, I want us to think about what happens when we do the reverse. So rather than climbing up that scale where we get more and more insulin resistant and more towards that diabetic range, what happens when we get more insulin sensitive? What happens when we lose some weight, when we change our diet, when we start exercising on a regular basis? And the answer is that we become more insulin sensitive. And if we do that enough, if we work enough at becoming more insulin sensitive, we can actually start reversing those numbers. We can pull ourselves from that diabetic range down into the pre-diabetic range and then down into the normal range, which is actually what Connor did. He went from diabetes all the way down, not even to pre-diabetes, but to the normal range, which is really amazing. So diabetes is a reversible illness. And when we get out of that diabetic range, we are considered to be in remission. And the reason we call it in remission rather than cured is that you can't just go back to what you were doing before. You always have to be extra careful, because if you just go back to what gave you diabetes, you're going to get diabetes again. But we can go into remission for forever. There's no reason that we need to have type 2 diabetes for the rest of our lives. We can bring those numbers down. We can go into remission, which is a really amazing thing because this is a difficult illness to manage. So if we can reverse it, then that makes our lives a lot easier and it drastically improves our health outcomes for the rest of our life. There's a study here that I do have linked for all of you on the resource handout that was provided for you. So if you're like me and you like to do a little bit more digging and get more into it, this is a really incredible study. There was a research doctor named Dr. Neil Barnard, and he and his team ran a study where they had two groups. They had a control group that was following the American Diabetes Association's recommended diet for patients with diabetes. And then they put a different group of patients on their own diet, which happened to be a whole foods plant-based diet. And when we talk about a whole foods plant-based diet, there are two parts to that. So the first part is whole foods, which means that the food should be as close to the agricultural source as possible. So it's a spectrum. So peanuts are a more whole food than Reese's peanut butter cups. Wheat is a more whole food than bread. So we want to be eating as close to what it looked like when it came out of the ground as possible. And then the other part is plant-based. And when we say plant-based, we mean that most of your food should come from plants. It should come from whole grains, from beans, from vegetables, and from fruits. Now, we're not telling you to completely eliminate meat and dairy, but we should be reducing them and replacing them with plant foods. That's going to help us manage that type 2 diabetes. So how fast does this happen? It depends on a number of factors. And honestly, the biggest one of those factors is how much effort you're willing to put in. How hard are you willing to work on it? Connor went all in when he made this change. He started exercising almost daily. He drastically changed his diet and he really worked hard at it. So he got very drastic results. However, if that doesn't work for you, if you know that you're not going to do it, if you're not very strict with it, then you can still make smaller changes and get some benefit. It's just that those benefits are going to happen more slowly and we may not see as much of a benefit as Connor saw. But I want us to know that we don't have to make drastic changes in order to see some benefits. This is, like the blood numbers, a spectrum. And so we do see benefits for whatever changes people are making. Now, when someone goes all in like Connor did, we've seen significant drops in fasting blood glucose in as little as 2 weeks when someone is being very strict. And then what happens with that is actually what we saw in that study that I referenced with Dr. Barnard, where this whole foods plant-based diet actually helps people reduce their need for medication faster and more effectively than the keto diet does, than the American Diabetes Association's recommended diet does, than any of the diets that recommend just controlling blood sugar and controlling that surface level problem do. But whatever changes we make, I want us to know that this should be a long-term change. This should be lifestyle changes. So it needs to be changes that we can sustain because crash diets do not work. We don't want you to go all in and then go right back to what you were doing after a week because going all in was too intense. As soon as we return to that old way of eating, we're going to start to get sicker again. And so we want to make changes that we know are sustainable for us that can help us get better over time. So I'm going to turn it over to Sam here, and he's going to walk us through what foods we actually recommend eating more of.
Yeah, so this is one of our favorite charts. This is, in fact, the chart Connor saw when they were going to go on our 6 week challenge. So um, basically, in the food here, the way we believe at Whole Health Club, particularly if you're trying to control your weight, and depending on how severe your diabetes or heart disease is, if we're working with you, these can have some slight differences. So these are a guide. So what you're going to see is the number on the right is calories per pound, a rough estimate for these types of foods. So we're going to start, non-starchy veggies and fruits. I'm going to put those into the same category. They're the two healthiest food groups you can eat. And when I say healthiest, I mean they're going to pack more nutrients per calorie than most other foods that will exist on anywhere on planet Earth. And you could maybe find some few, minute exceptions here and there. But non-starchy veggies is a way to think about this, as Austin always says, is salad vegetables. So like, what would you put in a salad? What those types of things would be on there? Right? Fruits, we all know fruits. Fruits get such a bad rap of being high in sugar. They are, but they are high in fiber. They are high in antioxidants. They're high in so many additional other nutrients that we really need to understand. Fruits play a vital role in long-term health. And unfortunately, it's one of the foods that Americans do not eat enough of at all. So don't be afraid of fruit. It is a phenomenal food. Then we're going to go to starchy veggies, right? These are potatoes, sweet potatoes, root-based vegetables is the way I like to think about this category of foods. There's other ones as well that would fall into there. But particularly potatoes. Again, people run from potatoes. My argument is the way Americans generally eat potatoes are exceptionally unhealthy. If we deep fry them, if we eat them French fries or chips, and that's the way we consume most of the potatoes in America, or the way I did in the Midwest, mashed potatoes with pounds of butter and pounds of cream cheese in it, they're no longer the potato. You're not going to find a potato in nature covered in fat. It doesn't happen. And so those starchy vegetables are amazing. They also are the number one food at helping you stay full throughout the day. So highly recommend those. Whole grains, again, closest to the source of the way you can eat it in the agricultural state as possible. So that's what we would mean by whole grains. Again, people often run from these if these are bad foods. Whole grains are a vital part of a healthy diet. And beans, to me, are an absolute superfood. They're high carb, they're high protein, they're high fiber. They're absolutely amazing. They're dirt cheap. Beans can play a massive role in a healthy diet. And it can prove that things like potatoes and beans and whole grains are exceptionally cheap for us to eat. So it does not have to be a expensive diet to reverse these. These foods, when you are working with Whole Health Club or in our beliefs to get healthier, can be eaten in unlimited capacity, with the extreme exception of some small amounts of fruits when you're excessively diabetic. And there's a very, very small amount of those fruits that would come into play that you would have to be careful of. And again, the whole fruit, not a dried fruit, not these other things, not something that's been changed. Now, when we talk about moderate, we're talking about 3 times a week. So pasta, while it's not close to the natural state, pasta gets a bad rap as an unhealthy food. And this may be true depending on how much you eat or your ability to manage your glycemic load. So that would be something to look at, but that's why we have it moderate as 3 times a week, generally consumed with these other healthy foods as well. Avocados. Now, avocados are a health food, everybody. They're phenomenal for you. But if you're trying to lose weight and you're eating a bunch of avocados a day, avocados are just calorically dense. They have an exceptional amount of calories, and it makes it hard to lose weight on these. So while please have avocados, but if you're trying to reduce your fat intake or you have severe heart disease, you will have to watch your avocado intake, as they do have an exceptional amount of fat in them. Bread. Bread is not the enemy. However, it shouldn't be our number one staple. It can be eaten in moderation, very healthfully. It is eaten in moderation in a lot of extremely healthy cultures. But again, it's pretty calorie dense. So if we eat too much bread, we're not going to see the weight loss, and we might not see the fat reduction we want. Now, here's the oddball of this whole group: nuts and seeds. Nuts and seeds are an absolute health food, but you're going to see the astronomical amount of calories per pound. Right? So we want to be cautious. And Austin made a great point. When you buy a bag of shelled pistachios and eat them by the handful, that is much simpler to consume them than even breaking them already made or finding them in nature, picking them, harvesting them, keeping them. They would not be consumed at a high rate. So that's something we want to be cautious of with nuts and seeds if we're trying to lose a lot amount of weight. Specifically, things like peanut butter can derail people. That would not fall into nuts and seeds. It would be more processed. But a spoonful of peanut butter, it has just an astronomical amount of calories and fat. So when we're trying to reduce those things, that might not be a good idea. Now, you're going to see the not recommended. We say 0 to 2 times a week because none of these foods play a role in a healthy diet. Not a single one. You don't need any of these foods to be healthy. However, they are built in culturally to a lot of our lives. So we do want people to just start recognizing these foods differently. And I think it's important to categorize them together. We have animal products on there. And that has to do with that almost all animal products have no fiber because fiber only comes with plant. It's one of the least eaten things by Americans. Only 3% of Americans get enough fiber in their daily diet, right? And yet we eat a lot of animal products. The second is going to be they all have cholesterol, meaning that your body produces all the cholesterol you need, so we should not be eating those. They're going to be high in fats, right? And they're extremely inflammatory to our body and our system as well. So they cause a lot of stress when we consume them. Now, you're going to see right below it is refined sugar, right? We all know refined sugar is not a health food. However, we know if we ate donuts for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that is not a good thing, right? But we do that with animal products. So what we want you guys to recognize is just pick and choose your spots when you're going to eat these animal products and save these for more of a special occasion, like a treat. And we can still live an extremely healthy life consuming moderate amounts of these products. Then we want to get into oils. Oils are a unique food that often get touted as a buzz or a health food or any of these things. They're absolutely not. Oil is it's so far from nature. It's such an excessive amount of fat that is put into one food, if you will. I don't even want to call it a food, a product. And the problem with oil is you're removing everything that was good from the original food. So when people go, well, what about like walnut oil? Eat the walnuts. What about avocado oil? Eat the avocado. Because we're eliminating so many other things. What about olive oil, Sam? Eat the olives. In fact, there's an awesome study, and we can always, get this over to you, that shows the Mediterranean diet is healthy in spite of the amount of oil they use, meaning that they eat so healthy otherwise, they're able to overcome the amount of oil that's in their diet. So when we say these other foods, alcohol and soda, I don't think anybody thinks these are health foods, but we should understand these two, alcohol and soda, processed and fried foods, are probably the worst category of foods you could consume when you're trying to turn around your life to be healthy. It really is. There's just really not a place for them. Understand every time you're consuming them, it's unhealthy. So this is a great way to start mentally thinking about some overarching goals of shifting the food you eat to the top of this chart and less of the bottom. Now, I want to go into the glycemic loads. And so Austin's going to tell us about what glycemic load means, what our glycemic index is, and we'll definitely give you guys a great preview on that. Austin, your audio's gone right now. So
That's right. Sorry about that. I muted myself. I had a cat on my table trying to knock my computer over, so I was muted for just a second. Sorry about that, everyone. Glycemic index, we're just kind of going a level deeper here. And this is really relevant to people who already have type 2 diabetes or are pre-diabetic. People who are in that healthy, normal range don't need to be overly worried about the glycemic index. But what glycemic index is it's just a measure of how quickly the carbohydrates in a food enter the bloodstream. And I want to kind of caution us here and say that glycemic index is just one measure out of many for how healthy a food is. All it's telling us is how fast the carbs enter the bloodstream. So there are some low glycemic index foods that are very unhealthy for you that you should not eat. There are some high glycemic index foods, like watermelon is the first one that comes to mind, that are very healthy for us. However, if we have type 2 diabetes, we don't want to be eating an entire watermelon in one sitting because of the way that would spike our blood sugar. So just keep in mind, some of the low ones are unhealthy, some of the high ones are healthy. But what we have tried to do here, and we've included this list for you in the handout that you have, is we picked out a list of foods that meet the criteria of being both low glycemic and meeting the recommended category for that chart that Sam went over. So you do have this list. This is in the handout, the resource handout that we provided for you. And so the homework that I'm going to give you all is your job is to try and eat as many of these low glycemic index foods on this list as possible. All of these foods fall within that recommended category that we recommend, and they are low glycemic index. So let's talk about some of these. Apples, just about any kinds of berries, cherries, peaches, plums, most kinds of beans, including chickpeas, kidney beans, pinto beans, and lentils. Some grains like barley, wild rice, and rolled oats, specifically rolled oats, not quick cooking oats. And then any kind of non-starchy vegetables. So think of salad vegetables. Some medium GI foods, So these are still okay to eat, but we should just eat them in smaller amounts if we are pre-diabetic or we have diabetes. If you don't have diabetes or pre-diabetes, if you're in that normal range, you can eat these as much as you want. Bananas, grapes, oranges, mangoes, brown rice, sweet potatoes, beets, and carrots. Now, if you have pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes, you can still eat these, just not every meal. We just want to moderate them a little bit. So I know that that's a lot of information, and we want to start showing you what that actually looks like when we incorporate these principles into a recipe. So I'm going to have Sam show us some of the recipes that we make at Whole Health Club. These are from our Whole Health Cookbook, and they apply those principles of being low in glycemic index and whole foods, plant-based foods.
So I'm a Midwest boy. I was raised on meat and potatoes, mostly meat. And so I like to eat. I like to feel full. We have big family dinners. So the Southern BBQ bowl is one of my favorites. What you're going to see is, you're going to find your barbecue sauce. Again, find an appropriate one depending on your level of health. But that's going to be cooked tempeh in there. You're going to see these beautiful greens. You could use collards. You could use spinach. Something there could be interchangeable. You're going to see beautifully cut sweet potatoes. You're going to see some cornbread on there. And you're going to see quite a few beans on there as well, or black-eyed peas. So the reason I love this is when people think plant-based, they think that we're stuck in salads. Guys, we're not. We have amazing, beautiful dishes we can eat. And that's why we wanted to come out with a cookbook. That's why we have a kitchen, because we needed to show people healthy can be delicious. So when we apply these, we just removed the chicken and we added tempeh, which is made soybeans. It is a bean, so we're good to go there. So those are going to be some of the big changes that we do here. And I just want to show you guys quick some of these other recipes. So a barley summer salad, right? When I say a salad, when I show that to people, they don't recognize that as a salad, because us people that are going to consume more plant foods, we're going to make hefty, full meal based salads like this. So barley, being a phenomenally satiating grain, is perfect to put in there. There's some chickpeas in there, and then there's a bunch of other chopped veggies, which is great because it brings a beautiful texture when you consume the food. And again, it is a fun dish to eat. Bring this to a barbecue this summer. I promise you, it will be empty by the time you leave. You don't even have to tell people it's plant-based or anything. Just bring a beautiful barley summer salad. And the next one, I know we're going into summer, but a great dish. Guys, chili. Chili is awesome. Chili is about the spices. So make sure when you have chili, guys, you're spicing it, you're seasoning it. It's not necessarily about the meat, the fat, or any of that. This can be made with beautiful vegetables, beans, and this is the way we want to look. In fact, the more beans you can put in the chili, the better. And this is our 30-minute chili recipe. So think we can always add other delicious spices to our recipes and textures to make it so we don't miss the meat. And then one of the last things we wanted to cover, guys, here is going to be plant-based versus vegan. There's a lot of talk of vegan, right? Vegan is an ethical decision, meaning that you're just choosing this to not consume anything to do with animals at all in your life. It does not mean health foods. Meals are often made with animal-based substitutes, which are processed and unhealthy. This also includes sugar, unrefined sugar in your diet, or refined sugar in your diet. You cannot eat any animal products. It is all or nothing diet. And it doesn't always improve our health outcomes. A plant-based diet focuses on more plants. Where can we add them? Centered meal around plant foods. And it does not have to be perfect. You can eat it on a spectrum. And the reasons people go plant-based tend to be to improve their health outcomes. So really quick, I just wanted to move into one of these slides because we want to make sure we have questions for you guys. But I definitely want to encourage my super quick story. I was raised in mid-Michigan. I consumed almost no plants because I was told meat is how you become big and strong. So before I went plant-based, the idea was ridiculous. So I don't want you guys to think the people talking here were comfortable with the idea of plant-based from birth. In fact, I read an amazing book called The China Study, and it changed my entire ideals around food and long-term disease outcomes. So at the age of 20, I decided to drop every food I had ever known as my favorite and go entirely whole foods plant-based. And it's been an amazing journey. I have no desire to go back. I've been plant-based for about a decade now, and I continue to do so going forward. My wife, in fact, has had a healthy plant-based pregnancy her entire time. So that's a little bit about how we became plant-based.
And really quick before we jump into questions, because I'm seeing some great questions pop up, so I want to give us lots of time for those. But really quick before we go into questions, I want to point out to all of you that all of those recipes that Sam went over, all three of those, the full recipe is in that resource handout that you have. We wanted to put those in there so you could try those recipes and see what these are like when we apply these principles to these recipes. So go ahead and give those recipes a try in that resource handout. And then the last thing I wanted to say before we jump into questions is that this doesn't just benefit type 2 diabetes. We have had lots of other members at the gym have success with reducing their need for and getting off of blood pressure medications, reducing their need for and getting off of statins for cholesterol, reducing their need for and getting off of a CPAP machine to help them breathe at night. So this helps a lot of areas of health in addition to diabetes, which is part of why it's so powerful, is because while we're helping prevent diabetes, we're helping prevent heart disease, we're helping prevent kidney disease, we're helping prevent cancer, we're helping prevent diabetes, we're helping prevent high blood pressure, we're helping prevent strokes. All kinds of things that can lead to really negative health outcomes for us are prevented by this way of eating and this lifestyle. And I think with that, we can jump to your questions. We would love to start answering some of your questions, and we'll bring Connor back in here in case you have any questions for Connor as well about his big lifestyle change.
Thank you, guys. That was a lot of information, excellent information, but a lot of information. I want to remind everybody who is participating, you can re-watch this entire thing or fast forward it to the parts you want to re-see or rehear. You will receive an email after the event. It'll have a survey in it asking how you like the event, but it will also have a link, and you can rewatch this, I think, through November 30th. You can also find the link to it on our AARP Michigan virtual events page, so you can rewatch it that way too. So that was a lot of great information. I have a lot of questions that have come in. So let me start
Awesome.
one more thing. The resources. I have a lot of questions about where are the resources. So if you look at the bottom of your screen where there's those round icons, the one that looks like two pieces of paper together, if you hold your cursor over it, it will say resources. Click on that. There's a number of resources in there. There's the resources that Connor and Austin and Sam have provided us. There's also several other documents. There is a document in there that if you participated in our earlier events is there. It also has some excellent resources on it. And there is a really great video link there that talks more about the whole food plant-based and how that works if you want sort of another explanation of that. So, all right. So let's see. We have Catherine asks, doesn't insulin work in the pancreas to metabolize sugar?
Austin.
So I can take this one. So insulin it's produced by the pancreas, but it doesn't actually help us metabolize it. All that insulin does is it's just a messenger for other parts of our body to start metabolizing that sugar. So it plays a role in sugar metabolism, but all it does is it's that signal to our muscles and liver to start doing the actual those metabolic processes. And our muscles can either grab that sugar and turn it into long-term storage, or they can send it off to the liver, which can turn it into longer-term storage, which is just fat.
All right, and then Vito asks, as you age, does the pancreas produce less insulin? That's another one for Austin.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll kind of answer that in two parts. So in a healthy person without diabetes, the answer is going to be generally not. Generally, the problem that we run into more is that even though the pancreas is producing the same amount of insulin, our tissues become more insulin resistant. And what we see as we become more insulin resistant is that the pancreas actually needs to produce more and more insulin. Now, the flip side to that is if we're looking at a diabetic patient, then the pancreas can produce less insulin as we age if that person has uncontrolled diabetes and their pancreas is constantly working overtime. If that's the case, then yes, over time, the amount of insulin the pancreas is able to produce does actually decline because it's been working overtime so long. And then that's when diabetes reaches a stage where it's no longer reversible. If we reach the stage where we have been working our pancreas so hard, over time so long that it can't produce the correct amount of insulin anymore, that's when diabetes becomes what we call insulin dependent. So we have to take insulin for the rest of our lives because our body no longer can produce the correct amount.
All right, thank you. All right, so I know that Connor early on talked about one of the things that his doctor recommended is he could go on a keto type diet. So Vito wants to know, is the keto diet a solution to diabetes?
I can take that one, so you guys maybe don't have to hear Austin the whole time, because clearly Austin is the genius here. So keto would be, while it would show you smaller blood sugar numbers, it goes back to the management issue. Versus really on a keto diet, as Connor said, it's exceptionally high fat. It is a small or moderate amount of protein, generally small amount of protein, and almost no carbohydrates. There is some ketogenic diets that can have an extremely small amount. But one of the things that we should think about beyond the medical side, because I will let you know the keto diet originated to help epileptic children minimize seizures, with the expectation they understood that the life expectancy of people on this is going to decrease. And so that is where this diet actually originated in, I guess, the studies or in the medical literature. Now, to go on the keto side, the biggest problem with keto, in my opinion, is the foods that Americans already consume at a high rate with high fat that cause things like heart disease, diabetes, and cancers. You're going to consume more of those foods. And so while, again, you're not consuming carbohydrates and you may not be diabetic, you're not being diabetic in spite of riding your cholesterol to 300 or having exceptionally high blood pressure or any of those things. So I would look at keto as a rebranded Atkins diet, meaning that we've kind of already know how those outcomes go. It's just keto is going to take that to the extreme. So I definitely would not recommend it as a solution to any form of diabetes.
All right. Again, I still have people asking where we get the handouts. So really quick, just once again, the bottom of your screen there, you'll see about 8 icons. The one that looks like 2 pieces of paper. On my screen, it's the 5th one over. You click on that, and that's where all the handouts are. All right, let's go back. We have so many excellent questions and so little time. So let's go here. What about, so I had a lot of questions early on about number of carbs per meal. So to maintain good sugar control, what is the recommended number of carbs per meal?
So I'll take that one. So I'm going to answer kind of in 2 parts again. One is for a healthy individual who does not have diabetes. And then the second half of the answer I'll give is for someone who does have diabetes. So for a healthy individual who does not have diabetes, I don't want you to worry too much about counting carbs. And there's a big if there, if those carbs are complex carbohydrates, are brown rice, are coming from beans, are coming from grains, because those foods are going to make you feel full before you can overeat on carbs. They have enough fiber in them. They have a low enough calorie content that you're not going to be able to overconsume carbohydrates before you start feeling full on those foods. Now, if we start eating things with processed sugars, then we can absolutely get out of control with carbs. Generally, though, you want your, and I'm going to give a percentage here rather than a number of grams because everyone's calorie needs are different. If you are a 6.5 foot tall person, you're going to have drastically different calorie needs from a 5'2" person. So generally, you want your carbs to be between 55 to 75% of your daily intake of calories. You can go even higher if you're eating those complex carbs and if you don't have diabetes. We've seen people, especially athletes, go up into like the 80% range and do just fine, be perfectly healthy on that. And then the second kind of piece of that is if you do have type 2 diabetes, what's more important than limiting a specific number of carbs per meal is keeping the amount of carbohydrate you consume at each meal constant. If it's constant, then that's useful for someone with diabetes to know what dose of insulin they should be giving themselves. If it's all over the place, like if you're having like 2 grams of carbs at breakfast and then 65 grams of carbs at lunch and then 10 grams of carbs at dinner, your blood sugar is going to go nuts because you're taking the same amount of insulin in response to each of those meals, but you didn't really need it for 2 of those meals, and 1 of those meals you really needed it. So to avoid big crashes and spikes, it's most important for people who have diabetes who are taking insulin to keep a constant number of carbs per meal. And that's where carb counting really comes into play for people who have diabetes.
And I just want to second that as somebody that has over the last 10 years had to work on the ground level of getting people to change their mentality around food. One of the best ways is look at food for things beyond the macronutrient perspective, right? So lately, over the last, it feels like decade or maybe decade and a half, we've looked at food from protein, carbs, and fat. Remember, Austin mentioned a lot of health benefits that were none of those things. So micronutrients play an exceptionally large role in being healthy, and it makes it a little bit easier to understand how to be healthy when a food is not labeled a carb or a fat. It's labeled the food category it should be, such as is this a whole plant food? Is this an animal-based product? Is this a processed piece of food? And consume the healthiest gamut of foods. That'll get you off this number train of numbers, number of protein, grams of this, scale says this number. And so that's what I found makes it a lot harder. And what we found is one of the easiest things of going all the way whole foods plant-based is a lot of those measurements get to be eliminated from your life.
And I do just want to add one last thing that I think ties. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Connor.
I was just going to say, and just for everyone's reference, when my wife and I started with Whole Health Club, we jumped in, like I said, 2 feet in for the whole food plant-based meal plan and diet. And my whole intention was to go right back to meat afterward. But one of the first things Sam said to me was, hey, it's all good food. So if you're full and you want to eat one more bite, eat one more bite. If you could, it's just all good stuff. Like there was no counting calories. There was no like trying to look at the different macros, which is stuff you have to do with keto. It was just, it's 100% whole food plant-based. Just eat. So I started eating more than I'd ever done before, and losing weight and gaining all the benefits of this for my labs and my A1C dropping, all that other stuff. But it was just so foreign to me when Sam first said it. He's like, just put one more bite in. And I was like, that's not how it works. And he's like, just trust us. And I did. And then I saw all the benefits. So it's nice when you jump into that whole thing that you don't have to start worrying about all of those. If you're putting good stuff in your body, then you can just keep putting good stuff in your body, and you don't have to worry about those percentages and macros.
So there's been a number of questions that have come in about, okay, I want to move to more plant-based, but I'm not going to move to complete plant-based diet. So how much of your diet needs to be whole food plant-based in order to be, to help?
So I'll take this one, and Austin, you can come in with if I misquote any incorrect data. So one thing I like to look at is, from a super simplistic standpoint, is to be plant-based, right? Understand if 51% of your calories came from plants, you're based in plants, right? But what we typically see is, one, sometimes changes can happen on a small amount of plant-based foods added. But in the medical literature, it seems to be around this 80% of your calories number is where you're going to see the largest benefits. And in fact, what we see with they're called blue zones. They're the 5 healthiest. There's a little bit more than 5 now, but there was originally 5 of the healthiest cultures on earth, meaning they have almost no cancer, almost no heart disease, and they have more centenarians than any other place, right? So more people living over 100. And one commonality is all of them eat 90% or more of their calories from plant-based foods, right? So this would be like Okinawa, Japan. This would be Loma Linda, California. This would be Sardinia, Greece. There's a few other ones. I'm sure Austin knows exactly where they are. And so I think that's really important to say, like, one, start progressively. Start doing something like a meal a day. And we teach this for a living, right? So like there's the medical literature, and then there's just the actual psychology of being able to stick to it. Breakfast, I will let you know, is one of the worst meals health-wise in America as we know breakfast foods. However, it is one of the easiest meals to change out in your everyday life to become consistently healthy. Most people I know love smoothies. I love smoothies, right? A smoothie in the morning outperforms health-wise any other standard American breakfast. It is not even close. And so doing small things like wake up, make a smoothie every morning. Start there. And then you can move beyond these other meals. It depends on your lifestyle where you'd want to change. If you're out on the road for lunch, that's a little bit more difficult. If you're home for breakfast and dinner, then make both of those meals the commitment to make these changes. So, and Austin, if there's any medical literature that's going to define, those percentage points, feel free to chime in there. But definitely just smaller, consistent changes in your lifestyle are going to be better. And think about it meal by meal is the way I do. We eat 21 meals a week plus snacks, right? So can you go Monday through Friday? Can you get 15 meals in that are whole foods, plant-based? That's a pretty good start.
A lot of the members at the gym have done what I know they've done that they've had some success with is eating breakfast and lunch plant-based. And then they go have their family dinner with their families and they don't eat that plant-based. But breakfast and lunch are usually on their own, a little bit easier to control. So those are a little bit easier for them to do plant-based. The other kind of practical tip that I like to give for making those small changes is look at the colors on your plate. If we think about the standard American diet, if you look at a plate, it's brown, like all of it's brown. I have like my brown breaded chicken patty and my brown roll and then my brown gravy. It's all brown. Versus if I have a plate with a lot of colors on it, where I have some greens and a sweet potato and there's some tomatoes and over here I have some black beans and like there's so many more colors on that plate than just brown. And that's a really great way to gauge like, hey, this is a healthier meal for me. Those colors themselves do contain nutrients. The pigments that actually give the plants those colors contain nutrients that are valuable for us. And it's just a good way to make sure that you're varying your diet, that you're getting a wide variety of plants. And it'll help you eat more plants because generally animal-based foods are going to be brown, at least once we cook them, brown or white. So if we're eating our reds, our yellows, our oranges, our greens, our blues, then we're getting a lot more plant foods.
Plus, what a pretty picture to post on social media.
There you go. All right. So I had a question, a couple of specific food type questions. One is plantain, I'm guessing they're thinking non-fried, a healthy starch?
Yeah, if it's not fried.
Yes.
Okay. I would just actually went to Costa Rica and ate a lot of them, and they are delicious if you haven't had plantains.
All right. So Patricia asks, should people who have taken statins for years and gotten diabetes ask for a reduction of their statins?
Ask for a reduction,
sure.
Is that?
Of their statins. I'm not sure what. So she said she's read that long-term use of statins combined with poor exercise can cause diabetes in older people.
So that's absolutely true. But sorry about that. Sorry to cut you off there, Karen. That is true. That long-term use is, does come with some negative side effects. I will say though, any medication changes you want to make, you got to go through your doctor. It's not safe for you to decide to make those changes yourself. It's not safe or legal for me to tell you to make those changes. So any medication changes you want to make, you need to go through your doctor. If you discuss with your doctor, like, hey, I've made some lifestyle changes. I'm exercising regularly. I'm eating better. I don't think I need these statins. Then your doctor will probably order some blood tests and then evaluate from there if this is a safe change to make or not.
Okay. All right. Jane asks, are vegan butters any better for you than margarine or regular butter?
So I would say like at the smallest minute level, they're healthier. But really what you're going to do is you're just condensing oils and fats, right? Whether we choose to condense them from an animal-based product, like while I do believe plant-based fats and proteins are probably a better option for you, condensing them down into oils and fats are always going to cause those, you're going to get an inflammatory response either way. You're going to be able to overeat butter. You're going to take a lot of good foods, by adding that butter and making them exceptionally calorically dense. When I told Connor, you can eat as much as you want, it's because good luck eating too many beans, too many fruits, you'll get full. There's no possible way for you to do it. Now, if Connor doused those foods in butter, like how a lot of the Southern culture eats vegetables, that's the problem is they eat a lot of vegetables, but they eat them covered in fat. And then that immediately minimizes or almost eliminates the health benefit you would have gotten from eating those foods. So I would say like If you want to be fully plant-based or you want to live a vegan lifestyle, sure. But if you're like, I want to lose weight or eliminate diabetes, do not place those in a regular portion of your diet whatsoever.
Yeah, I just always tell
All right.
people they're just less unhealthy.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Very good point. We have a few minutes left, a few more questions. So you talked about earlier, Austin, that 55 to 75% of your diet should come from complex carbs or plants. What percentage should come from fat? And when reading a label, what's the acceptable fat content or percentage? Or is that even something you can tell us?
Don't read
So
the
the
label.
general breakdown, the kind of general wisdom breakdown, I guess, is 65 to 75% from carbs, 15 to 25% from protein, and then the rest can come from fat. I will tell you though, you can eat as little as 5% of your calories from fat and still be perfectly healthy. Essential fat consumption in humans, there are some essential fat components that we need to consume. They're known as essential fatty acids. Our bodies can't produce those on our own. So if you hear about your omega-3, 6, and 9s, we do have to consume those from outside sources. However, those can be as low as 5% of your daily caloric intake, and you can still be healthy. We generally try to tell people to avoid getting fat over 30% of their daily calories. If it's over 30%, it's too high. If people are actively trying to lose weight, it's better to go lower. A lot of my clients will kind of stall out on weight loss when they get over 20%. But if we get it down below 20%, then we start to see faster weight loss. So I would recommend kind of trying to limit fat to at the very most under 30%. If you can get it down closer to 20%, even better.
And as far as labels go, if you're reading something with a label, most likely it's a product, not a food, right? And we need to understand that buying healthy crackers is not healthy, right? So the health food industry never really needed to be created. The produce section is already that. So like what I would tell you is when you go grab a tomato, you're not seeing the breakdown of what they put in it, right? And so that's a very important thing. Most things with the nutrition label are not healthy foods because they're further from nature. They've been artificially made. So we need to tell you, what does this artificial food have as a makeup? And so like, also guys, labels can be exceptionally deceiving. That is a whole deep conversation that I highly recommend you look into in your own time. And there's one fact I want you guys to note on this. You'll see all of these percentages along the label, right? You'll notice that sugar has got the ability to not have to label your daily percentage of sugar. That is a genius move by these sugar organizations by not having to cap or tell you the percentage of sugar you could consume on a daily basis. But they'll do it with carbs, fat, and protein. And so there's very interesting things on there. And the last thing I'll say is most products are going to be void of fiber, unless they're like a high fiber specific product, whereas all plant foods will come with fiber.
The way I've heard it put is if it's a plant, you're good to go. But if it's made in a plant, you should avoid it.
Boom.
So
love it.
Yes.
All right. So I would like to do a couple more questions because we're really running out of time here. But I've had a couple people asking about, can you comment on carbonated and flavored waters? Not the kind with added sugar, but sugar-free flavored waters.
Oh, I drink.
Or actually, there's another question about, is Diet Pepsi bad? Which the answer is yes.
So I love those carbonated beverages. As a former Midwest soda addict who was drinking an uncountable amount of Diet Cokes a day because that's what my mom had in the fridge, I really love the carbonation. So things like LaCroix, Bubbly, there's a lot of different brands out there that I'm probably going to miss. Waterloo, those are phenomenal. They're sugar-free. They have almost nothing in them. They have like the essence of a flavor in them usually, so you're not going to have those added things. But any diet drink is going to come with a host of other chemicals that are going to do bad things, whether they eliminate sugar, particularly aspartame. I think there's a lot of evidence now on aspartame and what it can actually do to us long term. So I would highly encourage any diet soda drink isn't going to be applicable, but carbonated water without flavor, with no sugar, great. Carbonated water when they're in the brand of LaCroix or those things are great. I consume them regularly.
Okay, excellent. So then I have had a couple people ask about certain sensitivities. How do you adjust? I think I know the answer to this, but have you answer it? How do you adjust for a gluten sensitivity or a soy sensitivity when you're eating or making whole food plant-based meals?
So I'll give you the simple and then let Austin take it over. Don't eat foods with those in it. There's plenty of plants out there that you can have a million. Now I'm gonna have Austin be the more kind answer of like what a coach would say if we were working with a client that had those issues.
So yeah, if you have a gluten sensitivity, I would look at other grains. So look at rice, look at gluten-free oats, look at grains that don't contain gluten. Most of them don't. Amaranth, quinoa, farro, all of those are going to be gluten-free. And then same thing with soy. I would replace it with a different kind of bean. Soy is, it's one kind of bean that we can use. I would replace it with a different kind of bean. You may avoid foods like tofu or tempeh, or if you want to spend a little bit more money, you could always buy options, tofu options that are made from chickpeas instead of from soy. But my general recommendation for members when they have an intolerance for soy is like, hey, let's leave the tofu out of this stir fry and let's replace it with a different kind of bean. Chickpeas are very tasty in a stir fry. So you can very easily do that instead.
Okay. And then we have several questions. This is going to be my last question to you guys because we're out of time. What are your thoughts on intermittent fasting? I've had 4 or 5 questions on that.
So I love this question. To me, it's like, look, I'm not going to say you couldn't find benefits from doing that. But what I would say is generally you're going to make your life more difficult. And what I know from like a human psychology and working with weight loss people or people wanting to get healthy is, well, yes, maybe if you're exceptionally disciplined, you could not eat for that 18-hour period and then eat for a 6-hour period. But most people were really, really bad at handling our cravings, which is why I encourage Connor to eat an additional bite. It's like, look, if you get too hungry, and I'm guilty of this, we are going for the quickest, simplest option. Right? Fast food companies have figured this out. That's why they are everywhere. If you are driving in a car and hunger hits, you want the quick option. And so in intermittent fasting, while that makes me exceptionally nervous, one, because I don't understand the idea of depriving your body of awesome foods through that long. I do understand the idea if I'm eating a standard American diet. Well, yeah, now for 16 hours or 18 hours, I'm no longer eating meat, dairy, and eggs or processed foods or, high fatty foods. But if you're eating a whole foods plant-based diet, one, I absolutely do not recommend intermittent fasting. It is so hard to eat enough calories on a diet full of nutrient-dense, low-calorie foods naturally in a 6-hour period. And so to me, the benefits do not outweigh the difficulties that you would face. And I'm sure Austin can explain that the benefits that were touted and told from other people aren't often as based in actual statistical data that intermittent fasting is better, rather than it's probably just caloric restriction that is causing some of the benefits. But Austin, I just didn't know if you had any thoughts, but we definitely do not recommend intermittent fasting at our facility of any sort.
The main reason that it works is it's just hard to get enough food into your body in that 8-hour period of time. That's why it makes people lose weight. That's really the big reason. There's, there are a lot of other explanations that you'll hear for it, but the big reason is it's just hard to fit enough food into that time frame. So yeah, we don't recommend it because it's difficult to do. It makes your life unnecessarily difficult, and makes it very difficult to do things that are very beneficial, like exercise. It's very difficult to go out, even for like a long walk. Even a form of exercise that isn't very intense, it's tough to go make yourself go for a walk when you haven't eaten in 16 hours. So we don't recommend it for those reasons.
All right. Well, I want to thank all of you, Sam, Austin, Connor. You are all fabulous. Great information. A reminder to folks that you can watch this again if you want to. You'll get an email afterwards with the link in it, and you can rewatch the entire thing or the sections you want. Or you can find it also by going to the AARP Michigan virtual events page. So thanks all of you. Great job. We really appreciate all your wonderful information. And Connor, lots of comments about how inspiring your story was.
Well, thank you, everybody. Hope everyone find your way to the whole place, become a convert, like I said.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everybody. It was a great time.
Thanks,
and,
everyone.
Check out the Whole Health Cookbook if you want to learn some awesome recipes.